The Galactic Empire had reigned supreme for centuries, its iron grip extending across countless star systems. To the rulers of this vast dominion, diversity was chaos, a threat to the pristine order they sought to impose. They saw themselves as the guardians of the universe, ensuring peace by eradicating what they deemed disorder. Species that resisted assimilation were labeled inferior, their cultures erased, their planets cleansed. Humanity, with its defiant spirit and unpredictable resilience, had long been a thorn in their side. On the edges of known space, nestled amidst the darkness of an uncharted star cluster, was a small human colony. It was a quiet settlement, untouched by the Empire's gaze, until now. The colony's people lived simple lives, planting crops, raising families, and staring up at the stars with dreams of a brighter future. The children, in particular, embodied this hope, their laughter filling the air, their curiosity boundless. The peace ended without warning. Imperial ships emerged from hyperspace like shadows descending upon the colony. Soldiers clad in black armor marched through the streets with cold efficiency, their helmets hiding any trace of humanity. Resistance was brief and futile. The settlers had no weapons, no means to fight back against the Empire's might. Houses burned as mothers clutched their children, begging for mercy that never came. The air filled with the acrid stench of destruction and the desperate cries of the dying. Among the chaos were two children, a boy and a girl, siblings no older than 10. They had been playing in the fields when the attack began, their laughter replaced by screams as the sky turned to fire. Clutching hands, they ran toward their home, hoping their father would protect them. But he wasn't there. The soldiers found them first. The last thing the children saw was the cold, unfeeling gaze of their executioners. When the fires finally died down, silence fell over the colony. The Empire had accomplished its mission, leaving nothing but ash and rubble. Yet among the survivors, those few who had hidden well enough to escape the slaughter, there was murmured talk of what would come next. Whispers passed between trembling lips, stories half believed but clung to out of desperation. One name surfaced again and again, spoken with a mix of fear and hope: the Baba Yaga. He had no official title, no rank within humanity's fractured remnants. To some, he was a myth, a tale told to frighten enemies and rally the oppressed. To others, he was real, a shadowy figure who had once struck terror into the Empire's heart. He moved like a ghost, they said, leaving no trace but bodies in his wake. His methods were brutal, his vengeance absolute. And above all, he was known to be a father who would stop at nothing to protect his own. No one knew his real name. But the Empire would soon come to know the wrath of the Baba Yaga, for the children they had slaughtered were his. Word traveled slowly to the edges of unclaimed space, but it reached him nonetheless. A coded message intercepted by a distant ally confirmed the worst. The colony had been razed, every soul either lost or scattered. He read the report in silence, his hand trembling only once before steadying. The names of his children appeared near the end, among the dead. For a long moment he stared at the words, his face a mask devoid of emotion, though his heart was a storm. Grief came first, raw and unrelenting. It ripped through him, leaving him breathless, his knees hitting the cold floor. The weight of their absence pressed down like a crushing tide. He closed his eyes, seeing their faces as they had been, bright, full of life, their laughter the only sound that ever softened his heart and soul. They were gone now, their lives extinguished without reason or mercy. In the stillness that followed, grief transformed into something sharper, colder: resolve. Memories surfaced unbidden, fragments of a life he tried to leave behind. Years ago, he had been a shadow in humanity's war against the Empire. A master of precision, he operated where armies could not, slipping behind enemy lines to dismantle their machinery of oppression. To his comrades, he was a hero. To the Empire, he was a phantom, a force whispered about in fear, given a name that had followed him ever since: the Baba Yaga. He'd walked away from that life for his children, trading death for the quiet of an unmarked world. But peace was never meant for men like him. He stood, a new clarity burning in his eyes. The Empire had made a mistake, a grievous one. They had taken his children, and now they would learn the cost of such folly. Moving to the corner of his small, unassuming home, he pulled away a panel, revealing a hidden passage beneath. Dust coated the steps as he descended, the faint hum of old systems coming to life as he approached. The room below was a relic of another time, a time when his survival depended on the tools laid out before him. Weapons of all kinds lined the walls, their sleek forms still as deadly as the day they were forged. He ran a hand over a knife, its blade black as night, the edge honed to perfection. Beside it hung a suit of armor, lightweight yet impenetrable, built for speed and silence. He took a deep breath, his fingers brushing against a locket sitting atop a workbench. Inside were the faces of his children, smiling, forever untouched by the cruelty of the galaxy. He donned the gear with practiced efficiency, every movement purposeful. The armor felt heavier now, though it was not the weight of metal but of purpose. His weapons, once dormant, now hummed with power as he activated them. He strapped the locket to his wrist, a silent promise to the children he had failed to protect. There would be no mercy for those who had done this. In the darkness of the room, he paused, staring at his reflection in a cracked monitor. The face that stared back was no longer a father but a predator. For years, the galaxy had forgotten what he was capable of. That was about to change. The Baba Yaga had returned, and he would not stop until the Empire paid for every life it had taken. The outpost loomed in the distance, a stark monolith of steel and arrogance planted on the surface of a barren world. It was one of many such installations, insignificant in the grand scheme of the Empire but vital for logistics and intelligence. For him, it was the first step on a long road of vengeance. He approached under the cover of darkness, his movements silent, his form blending seamlessly with the jagged terrain. A patrol passed by, their footsteps echoing faintly in the still air. He waited, counting heartbeats, before striking. A swift motion, a blade catching the dim light, and one guard crumpled to the ground without a sound. The other turned too late, his weapon halfway raised before a second strike ended him. The bodies were dragged into the shadows, their absence unnoticed by those inside. The outer defenses fell just as easily. He bypassed the security systems with practiced ease, his years of experience evident in every motion. Cameras were blinded, alarms silenced, entry points breached without raising suspicion. He moved through the corridors like a phantom, his presence felt only in the wake of the bodies left behind. Each kill was precise, efficient, no wasted movement, no unnecessary noise. Reaching the command center, he accessed the terminal, searching for the names he needed. Files scrolled past, detailing operations, troop movements, and the colony's destruction. He committed the information to memory, each detail fueling his growing fury. The perpetrators were high-ranking officers stationed elsewhere, their names etched into his mind with the permanence of stone. But information was not enough. They had to understand what was coming. The guards stationed in the outposts were pawns, complicit only by association, but he made an example of them nonetheless. Each room he entered became a scene of calculated chaos. Bodies were left in positions that spoke of deliberate intent, arranged in ways that unsettled, that hinted at something far more menacing than random violence. Symbols were scrawled on walls, simple yet chilling. A single black mark, the meaning of which no one could decipher, became his calling card. Survivors stumbled across the aftermath, their terror growing with each step. Whispers of the Baba Yaga began to spread, first in hushed tones among the soldiers and then in frantic reports sent up the chain of command. As he moved toward the exit, he left one survivor alive, intentionally and with purpose. A trembling officer, too young and inexperienced to be a real threat, was dragged before him. The mask he wore amplified the effect, his voice low and cold as he delivered a single message. "Tell them I'm coming." The officer nodded frantically, too terrified to speak. He released him, knowing the words would reach their intended audience. As the alarms finally blared and reinforcements arrived, he was already gone, a shadow fading into the night. The Empire dismissed the reports at first, attributing them to paranoia or exaggeration. But the name Baba Yaga carried weight, even among their ranks. They had heard the stories, the warnings from the wars long past. Yet they believed the man behind the legend was long dead, a relic of a bygone era. They would soon realize how wrong they were. The Empire responded swiftly, unwilling to let the whispers of the Baba Yaga spread unchecked. High-ranking officers dismissed the initial reports as exaggerations, but the growing fear among the ranks demanded action. A message came from the top: the Baba Yaga must be eliminated, his legend extinguished before it took root. They deployed elite units, soldiers bred and trained to face the most dangerous threats, armed with the best technology the Empire could provide. They set traps, carefully orchestrated ambushes designed to corner and crush him. Checkpoints were fortified, patrols doubled, and surveillance expanded to unprecedented levels. They studied his tactics, analyzing the patterns of his movements, hoping to predict his next strike. But their understanding was flawed, limited by their inability to comprehend the mind of someone who thought far beyond their rigid strategies. The first trap failed spectacularly. A squad of Imperial elites lay in wait at a key supply depot, confident in their numbers and firepower. He didn't take the bait. Instead, he struck from the shadows, turning their own carefully laid plans against them. Explosives detonated in precision, cutting off their escape routes and plunging them into chaos. The few who survived fled, their confidence shattered. The Empire escalated, deploying larger forces and more advanced technology. Drones swarmed the skies, scanning every inch of the terrain. They thought they had him cornered, trapped in the ruins of an abandoned facility. But when they stormed the location, they found only death. He had turned the environment into a weapon, rigging the area with traps that punished their arrogance. Walls collapsed, corridors became kill zones, and panic spread as they realized they were outmatched not by numbers but by ingenuity. Amidst the escalating violence, he began to question himself. Each encounter left more bodies behind, his methods becoming increasingly ruthless. There was no hesitation in his strikes, no mercy for those who stood in his way. But in the rare moments of quiet, he felt the weight of his actions. The faces of his children came to him, their innocent smiles a stark contrast to the bloodshed that now defined his path. He wondered if they would recognize the man he had become, or if they would even forgive him. The whispers of his name grew louder, spreading beyond the Empire's borders. Among the oppressed, he became a symbol of resistance, proof that the Empire's grip could be broken. From the shadows emerged unlikely allies, individuals from species long crushed under Imperial rule. They sought him out, offering their skills, resources, and knowledge in the hope of striking back against their common enemy. At first, he resisted. Trust was a luxury he could not afford, and their motives, however noble, were not his own. But their persistence and willingness to risk everything wore down his defenses. He began to see them not as liabilities but as tools, a means to an end. He gave them no promises, only orders. They followed without question, their belief in the legend of the Baba Yaga driving them forward. With their help, his strikes became bolder, his reach extending further than the Empire anticipated. Supply lines were severed, communications disrupted, and key installations destroyed with surgical precision. The legend of the Baba Yaga evolved into something more, a movement, a rallying cry for those who had suffered under the Empire's heel. The Empire, once confident in its unassailable power, now faced a growing storm. And at the center of it all stood a man whose grief and vengeance had reshaped the galaxy. But even as his allies rallied and his enemies faltered, the question remained: how far was he willing to go, and what would be left of him when the dust finally settled? The Galactic Empire's capital was a fortress unlike any other, a labyrinth of steel and fire where the galaxy's most powerful figures resided. It was here that the orders for the massacre had been given, and it was here that he would finish what he had started. The Empire had fortified its heart, expecting an attack, but they had underestimated the man who had become their nightmare. He infiltrated the capital with the same precision that had made his legend. Security systems fell silent as he moved through the shadows, bypassing layers of defenses meant to be impenetrable. Guards patrolled in squads, their vigilance heightened by fear of the Baba Yaga, yet their eyes never caught him. He left no bodies in his wake, no sign of his presence until it was too late. Reaching the inner sanctum, he confronted the officials responsible for the colony's destruction. The room was opulent, its walls adorned with symbols of imperial dominance. The high-ranking officers were not warriors but bureaucrats, their power rooted in manipulation rather than combat. They stared at him, their expressions shifting from disbelief to terror as they realized the stories were true. A brief but brutal fight followed as their guards tried to protect them. His movements were a blend of calculated strategy and raw efficiency, each strike deliberate and devastating. The guards fell quickly, their advanced training no match for his experience. The officials cowered behind their desks, pleading for mercy as he stepped forward, blood dripping from his blade. He found himself face to face with the Empire's leader, the architect of humanity's suffering. The leader was defiant, even in the shadow of death, dismissing the Baba Yaga as nothing more than a relic of a broken species. The leader's words were meant to provoke, but they only revealed a deeper truth. The Empire had never understood humanity's resilience. In that moment, the protagonist faced a choice. The rage that had driven him burned hotter than ever, demanding retribution. He could end it here, strike down the figure before him and claim vengeance for his children. Yet as he raised his weapon, their faces came to him again, not as victims but as reminders of what he had once fought for. Instead of a killing blow, he delivered a warning. With a steady voice, he made it clear that the Empire's reign of terror was over. The leader's life was spared, not out of mercy but as a message to all who might follow. Humanity would not be broken. The officials were left alive to face the consequences of their actions, their fear ensuring they would never forget the day the Baba Yaga walked among them. As he departed the capital, the cracks in the Empire's facade began to spread. News of his actions ignited rebellions across the galaxy, oppressed species rising against their conquerors. The Empire's soldiers, demoralized and afraid, began to falter. The legend of the Baba Yaga became more than a tale of vengeance, it became a symbol of hope, proof that even the mightiest forces could be challenged. For him, there was no celebration, no triumph. He returned to the shadows, his mission complete but his loss unchanged. The galaxy had been set on a path to freedom, but his heart remained heavy with the memory of his children. In a quiet moment, he stood on the edge of a distant world, gazing at the stars they had once dreamed of. The Baba Yaga faded from sight, but his legacy endured. Whispers of his name continued to circulate, a warning to tyrants and a beacon to the oppressed. He had reminded the galaxy of humanity's unyielding spirit, of its capacity to endure and fight back even in the face of unimaginable loss. And though his story ended in solitude, it carried with it the promise of a better future, one built on the resilience and determination of those who refused to surrender.